The rescue dog no one had wanted was the only one in the house who understood what was happening. That night changed how they thought about everything. They had named him Biscuit, as a joke. A 70-pound Labrador mix with a bite history and a file at the rescue that listed 3 previous returns. He had been with them 11 days when their daughter Fern came home from the hospital. Fern was 3 weeks early. 4 pounds, 14 ounces. She passed all her discharge screens. She came home on a Tuesday in a yellow knit cap and a car seat that looked too large for her. They had been told, newborn sleep. Watch for breathing changes. Call if something feels wrong. The first night, Biscuit lay down outside the nursery door and didn't move until morning. Their father, Gerald, came down the hall at 6:15 a.m. and stepped over him. He thought, first night jitters. The dog is adjusting. He made coffee. Fern woke up at 6:40. Everything was fine. The second night, Gerald watched Biscuit go to the nursery door at 8 p.m. before Fern was even down for the night, and lie down facing it. He did not whine. He did not scratch. He lay facing the door with his chin on his paws and stayed there. When Gerald got up at 2 a.m. to check the monitor, Biscuit was still there, still facing the door. Eyes open in the dark. Gerald told his wife Naomi in the morning. He sat there all night. Naomi said, he's probably picking up that something is different. New smells, new sounds. Gerald said, he didn't even move. Naomi was a registered dietitian. She worked with patients, not with animals or infants. She did not have a clinical framework for what was happening. But she had the trait that good nutrition counselors develop. She paid attention to patterns. She noted this one. The third night she set up the baby monitor camera to also face the hallway, so she could see both on her phone from the bedroom. At midnight she checked it. Biscuit was at the door. At 2 o'clock she checked again. At 2:47 she woke to her phone buzzing. Not an alarm, just the notification she'd set to check. She looked at the screen. Biscuit was standing, not lying down. Standing, facing the door and making a sound she could hear faintly through the monitor, even at 2:47 a.m. Not barking. A sustained low vocalization, barely audible, like something between a whine and breath. She got up. Biscuit stepped aside when she opened the nursery door. He didn't go in. Fern was in the crib on her back, eyes closed. The monitor on the dresser showed normal readings. The room was at 69 degrees. Naomi picked her up. The small body was warm. The breathing was present, but something in the way Fern felt in her arms was different. A heaviness to the stillness. A quality she could not have named clinically and did not need to. She had held her daughter every night for 9 days. This was not the same. She called the NICU nurse line. She said, something feels wrong with my daughter. She's breathing. She's warm. But something is wrong. They told her to come in. If you stay for stories about what animals sense before we do, you're in the right place. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. At the children's hospital, the attending physician found that Fern's oxygen saturation had been cycling. Dipping and recovering in a pattern consistent with neonatal apnea of prematurity, an incompletely matured brainstem respiratory control center, causing brief pauses in breathing that self-resolved, but were accumulating in duration. The pauses had been happening for days. They had been happening below the threshold of consumer monitor detection. The NICU nurse who reviewed the case, a woman named Sandra Obi, 17 years in neonatal care, told Naomi that the monitor she had at home was not designed to detect the specific pattern they were seeing, she said. The gaps between episodes were long enough that the alarm threshold was never crossed. She said, "What made you come in tonight?" Naomi said, "My dog stood up." There was a pause on Sandra's end. She said, "How many nights had he been sitting there?" 3. Another pause. she said. That dog knew something was changing for 3 nights. Has your dog ever done something that made no sense until it was the only thing that made sense? Tell us in the comments. These stories deserve to be heard. The volatile compounds that accompany hypoxic episodes, brief reductions in oxygen during apnea events, alter the breath chemistry in ways detectable to a dog at concentrations orders of magnitude below human perception. Biscuit had been sitting outside the nursery door since the first night because the first night was when the pattern began. He sat. He stayed. He waited at the door the way animals wait when something is wrong on the other side and no one will let them in. The third night the pattern changed again, the episodes lengthening, and he stood up. He made the sound that was almost not a sound. It was the only escalation available to him. Fern spent 11 days in the NICU on monitoring. She came home on a Tuesday in the same yellow knit cap and the same car seat, with a cardiorespiratory monitor that clipped to her chest and sent readings to Gerald's phone every 30 seconds. Biscuit met her at the door. He sniffed her blanket once. He looked up at Gerald. Then he walked to the living room and lay down in his usual spot and exhaled. Every guardian deserves to be recognized, even the ones who never asked for anything in return. If stories like this matter to you, subscribe so you never miss the next one. He does not sit outside the nursery door anymore. The monitor does its job and Biscuit does his, and most nights they are the same job, and some nights only one of them is called to act. Gerald checks the monitor display before he goes to sleep. Then he checks the hallway. If Biscuit is in his bed, he sleeps. He has not returned the dog to the rescue. He has not spoken again about the bite history in the file. Some things you learn about an animal that changes the whole account. Next, a story about the family who thought their dog had finally turned dangerous, and the carbon monoxide reading that explained everything.